In an age of big data, A/B testing, and data-driven results, it is easier today, now more than ever, for communicators and marketers to heavily target their campaigns. Thanks to social media and the amount of information we, as users, provide companies like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, communicators and marketers can drill down to the exact audience they are trying to reach, stretching out our increasingly shrinking budgets, creating more effective ads, and for consumers, clearing news feeds of clutter and ads we don't want or need. According to Harvard Business School professor John Dighton in DM News, data-driven marketing spend is a little under 20% of the $1.3 trillion total annual marketing spend in the United States. That's a lot of dough. So, in this age of data, is there still room for intuition? What happened to trusting your gut or instinct? According to a new report by the Institute for Public Relations, a nonprofit that conducts PR research, and Peppercom, a digital communications agency, senior communicators and marketing executives are choosing their gut over data. Today, we discuss the benefits of both avenues and uncover when is the best time to use data and when is the best time to trust your inner voice. So clear your cluttered mind and trust us on this one. Today's episode is sponsored by Reagan Awards. If you're seeking opportunities to accelerate your career in public relations, you should consider entering a Reagan Award program. You'll prove the success of your contributions to your company, earn a free registration to a Reagan event, and take home a shiny trophy. Current programs include the Video and Visual Awards, the PR Daily Awards, which will focus on the industry's most successful PR campaigns, publications, and events, and the ACE Awards, which honors individual PR practitioners from in-house teams and agencies. Young PR Pros listeners will receive 20% off. That's 20% off entry fees for these three programs using the code YOUNGPR. Visit reagan.com/awards to enter today. Hi, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Young PR Pros, a podcast for the young and young at heart PR pros looking for tips and advice on how to build and advance their careers. I am Christine Darbell in Ottawa, Canada.
And I am Ross Simmons in Halifax, Nova Scotia.
And it's just you and me today, Ross.
This is it. You and I love it. It's going to be fun.
I have a very quiet fireside chat with Christine and Ross. This is going to be fun.
Exactly. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be very, very, very different, but I think the listeners are going to enjoy it. I'm looking forward to a one-on-one. It's going to be fun. It's like we're sitting around a coffee shop, just me and you having a chat about our favorite things. So I'm looking forward to it.
Exactly. And you know what? And this is probably one of your favorite things because we're going to be talking about a little bit of data, a little bit of marketing, and trusting your gut. So, we finally have the tools to heavily target our comms and ad campaigns. And I've been doing this a lot lately, A/B testing and having like several different sort of social media ads out and then figuring out what works, what doesn't, what resonates with one audience over another. And in fact, it's actually making better use of our dollars. We're able to track our campaigns even more successfully nowadays. And just when I start to get excited about this big data world, I read an article on Forbes that reports that hackers are making $5 million a day by faking 300 million video views on various social networks. And then The Guardian reported that Facebook claims that your ad could reach more young people than they actually exist in the UK.
Right.
So this is a little bit of a problem. And it's no wonder that senior communicators and executives nowadays are actually going back to the basics, and they're just trusting their gut and using their experience to inform the direction of their campaigns. So I thought this was really important for our listeners because I think it's going to be something that a lot of our listeners are going to run up against because we're entering, as young professionals, we enter this world, we're expected to know everything about technology. That includes all the data behind it. And yet there are now senior executives that are going back and saying, no, I'm just going to trust my gut. And if you're a young professional that only has a little bit of experience, how can you trust your gut? So I feel like we're in this limbo right now. So what should young professionals expect when they walk into their first job? Should they trust their gut, or should they trust the data? What do you think?
That's a tough one. I think every organization that you walk into is going to be very different. The culture of an organization usually determines whether or not they're an organization that relies heavily on gut, or if they're an organization that relies heavily on data. If you're going into a tech company that is on the level of, say, a Google or an Amazon or a Facebook or a Twitter or LinkedIn, then there's no question that data is going to rule the decision-making process. You're going to have to rely heavily on data. Mm-hmm. And typically when you're working in those types of scenarios, the benefit is that you're going to have a lot of data. When you're working with a company that has invested the time and energy to not only train themselves, but also their people on how to use data, you have an opportunity to kind of understand a little bit more about what The Guardian was talking about in that piece around reaching more young people than actually exist in the UK. So you can dive deeper into reports like that and get a better understanding of what that means and why those metrics were showing up the way they were. The Guardian might not understand the fact that when young people are traveling through the UK, those young people are also being targeted through ads. They might not understand that if somebody happens to be in the UK at an airport just for a quick moment of time and they go on Facebook, they're going to be targeted through that ad campaign as well. So I think that when you work in an organization where they have a deep understanding of data and they invest heavily in teaching their people, but also ensuring that it's a part of their day-to-day culture, that differentiates it. And then I think the gut element, there's no question that there is element of gut that has value. I would never discredit that, but I do think that more and more as we get better with data and as we get a better understanding of how to use it to drive results for our businesses, you're going to see more and more value in these channels. I think there's no question that there's value in gut, but I think that as we become more educated and we become more savvy with data, we'll be better equipped to make communications decisions based off of it.
And I think data and your gut might also go hand in hand, right? I mean, you might have a gut reaction or a gut feeling and you say, I really think our campaign is going to probably better resonate with this audience. This is what I'm feeling. This is where my gut is pointing me towards. And then you use the data to either confirm that your gut is correct or even refine it, right? Because your gut's not going to be able to tell you and narrow down exactly because again, nowadays data, you can dive deep and you can get really, really great insight, right? Your gut's not going to be able to do that. Your gut's not going to be able to say, this particular ad is going to reach people between the ages of 13 and 17, mainly males, so again, you might have a gut reaction to say, I think this might probably be better for females and they might be younger, but then the data is really going to enforce it. And then again, as you sort of like dive deeper into the data, then that's when you can refine your campaigns a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think that for the young professionals, that point around kind of using the data to kind of validate or discredit their initial gut is a key one. I love that idea of doing A/B testing of some sort.
I've been doing that actually a lot lately, and I find that in certain scenarios, when my gut's not telling me anything, the data is what I trust because maybe I don't know. And especially when I'm trying something new, right? And in young professionals, when you're getting into a new job, you might not have a gut reaction. You might actually have no idea where to go. And I find that, social media ad campaigns, is a really easy one to just, trust the data. Now, on the other side of things, I do a lot of media relations, and I find that that's where my gut comes into play a little bit more. Mm-hmm. You can feel if you're talking to a reporter and on the other line, you're hearing their intonation of their voice, your gut might kick in and start to tell you, you need to run, or you need to change the subject, or you need to find a better way to explain your key message. Data might not help you in those scenarios. So it also depends on kind of what you're doing. And because communications, marketing, PR is so broad, in some scenarios, you might have to rely on your gut, and that might, save you in some scenarios. But then in other scenarios, the data is going to be king.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the interesting pieces of this discussion is like when you're describing the conversation that you're having with a reporter and how they interact with you. At the end of the day, when you're analyzing their feedback, you're analyzing the way that they sound, you're analyzing the words that they're saying. That's all data. Like that is all data that you're taking in, and you're analyzing to kind of make a decision around whether or not you should approach it from a more empathetic way, or whether or not you need to be more aggressive, right? So data is all around us. It's just the definitions that are getting a little bit skewed a bit by everyone.
Agreed. Yeah, no, that's definitely true. So let's look at a day-to-day scenario. And I'm curious to know, when do you have an example of when you trusted your gut and it worked? Or do you have an example of when you trusted your gut and it failed you?
That's a good question. So I have a example of when I trusted my gut from a professional standpoint. It's not really a communication standpoint. And it worked out. And that would have been when I quit my job. So the data would have told me that it made absolutely no sense. I just had a mortgage, like nothing about the idea of quitting my job before when I did it made sense. The finances weren't in the bank. I didn't have any savings. I was just taking a leap into the abyss without any real plan. But in my gut, I wanted to try something different, and I wasn't really happy. So making that leap was definitely a gut decision. What about you? Is there anything on your end that you trusted your gut and it worked out?
I'm trying to think of an example. I actually might have an example of when I trusted my gut and it didn't work out. Okay. Which, I think it happens, to the best of us. And, I don't remember the specifics, but, it was a scenario where I tend to be, I want to be always open and transparent and kind. And I guess I assumed that the people on the other end were going to do the same thing.
Right.
And I might have been a little bit too open and shared a little too much. And my gut was saying, you need to be open. You need to be transparent. They're going to respect you for it. They'll respect you for your honesty. And unfortunately, it ended up coming and nipping me, in the butt later on. And I ended up sharing a little bit too much information when I shouldn't have. And that's the case where I should have been a little bit more analytical. And I should have actually, looked at the data and looked at the scenario analytically, and then analyzed it a little bit better instead of just, trusting I should be as open and transparent as possible. Not to discredit being open and transparent. And I think that's really important for public relations, communications, and marketing professionals. It's really important for us to be honest, open, and transparent. We do not want to take a step backwards into the days of spin doctors. But I think sometimes it's important to analyze what you're saying, especially if it is with a reporter, to make sure that the information that you're sharing is honest, but also is going to make sure that it enhances your brand, right? Ultimately, you are working for a company and you want to make sure that their brand is respected. So that was one example where I think I probably would have wished that I would have been a little bit more analytical and analyzed the data before responding to a question.
Right. Fair enough. I think we've all been in that situation. In business, it's one of those tricky ones. Like, you want to tell people to kind of let their guard down and be okay with being open and transparent. But I think the one thing that all of us make the mistake of kind of misunderstanding is that everybody's not exactly like you. So you always assume that everybody is the same or has a similar mindset as you around business, around transparency, around their work ethic, around all of those things. And I'd say that that is the exact same mistake where I've trusted my gut, thinking that people would work as hard as I do, that people would be as open as I am, that people would have the same motivations in kind of goals as I do. And ultimately they don't. So I think it's easy for us to get caught up in this idea that everybody is going to be motivated by the same things, inspired by the same things, and that everybody is kind of like us, when in reality, that's not the case.
Yeah, yeah. And it's it's okay to be an optimist and try to be as positive and try to hope that humanity on the other end is going to be just like you. But like you said, we do have to think about what about those who are not like us, and just make sure that we're guarded just slightly without killing our optimism. Right? We're 100%. An optimistic podcast, right? We need to be.
It's
true. All right. So then now let's talk about the data. What about, trusting the data? Again, Forbes and The Guardian, and you kind of already poked a little bit of a hole in The Guardian's article there, but there are a lot of respectable organizations out there that are saying, or respectable publications, that are poking holes in data and saying that it's not all real and you can't trust it 100%. So I'm curious, when did you trust the data and it actually, and it worked for you?
Yeah, so trusting the data is definitely something that it's a bit of a guessing game in many ways, and it's honestly taking that element of what we talked about before and just hoping that on the other end of the reporting, the companies who are providing you with that data are providing you with quality work. So for me, an example where I trusted the data would be for many campaigns. So when I work with clients, it always does start with data, where I'm looking at third-party journals, I'm looking at reports, I'm looking at analytics, I'm diving into estimates around their traffic, around what keywords they're being searched for. Like, I rely heavily on data. And the question around whether or not we can trust it is really a double-edged sword, because at the end of the day, in many ways, when it comes to digital marketing, you have no choice. Like, you have to trust the data in certain elements. Otherwise, you're just not going to have any ideas. You're not going to have any campaigns. You're not going to have any efforts that you can actually execute on. So I think that we have to rely a little bit on data. And it's that saying, like, in data we trust. It's a bit of a blind gamble, but it's something that I think is just a part of the game. In many situations, for me, I like to combine both qualitative and quantitative data. So the quantitative data would be things that come back from, say, a Google Analytics, and then the qualitative would be things that I'm noticing. So it's kind of more on that trend side. So maybe I'm noticing that a lot of people within a certain demographic are sharing a certain type of content in a certain community online. That's a qualitative insight that is essentially data that I can then present to my client and say, we're going to leverage that to kind of drive success. And I've done that over and over again with great results. But I 100% agree that when it comes to that quantitative side, you have to ensure that the foundation is there where you're going to receive quality info. Otherwise, you're going to be making big decisions off of data that might be incorrect.
Yeah, I think you're right in the sense where if we don't have to, I mean, our industry is slowly starting to, edge towards this. Like, we've had such a problem with, PR communications and marketing not being able to measure our successes and measure like successive campaigns or how they're going. And we've often had to just, used our gut or used analytical stories about, well, we think it's going well because we've heard this and this and this. And a lot of times executives didn't like that. And then we ended up getting pushed off to the corner and our budgets were slashed. And now we're finally getting back there where we can actually go back and say, no, it's no longer just this, he said, she said sort of reporting. We actually have clear numbers. These are the people engaging with you online. Here are the people who are visiting your website thanks to a campaign, because we actually are tracking the link that we're sharing with people on social media or through emails or through whatever it is, right? And it's finally showing that PR and communications and marketing is every bit valuable in its dollars compared to advertising and any other sort of department out there. So we kind of have to trust it because it's bringing our budgets back. It's bringing our credibility back, right? Exactly. So if we can't trust it, then we're back to where we were, 2-3 generations ago.
It's true.
I'm actually very fortunate that we have a tool at work that we can test campaign concepts, and we recently were putting together a campaign for a younger generation, younger than me, like it was like high school generation, and I haven't been in high school in a while. And I looked at the
I wouldn't have guessed. I would not have guessed.
My team and I looked at the campaign. It seemed okay. We thought maybe it would work. But again, we're not high school students. So we actually had the ability of testing the concept with a focus group. And we were blown away because we learned a lot. We learned that the campaign would not have worked. It did not resonate. And we saved, we did have to spend a little bit of money, obviously, to test it, but we saved so much money, because could you imagine if we would have put all that effort in, well, yeah, it kind of looks good, so let's just go out with it,
right.
Put all the advertising dollars behind it, just to find out that it's a major backlash or a major flop, right? So exactly. Sometimes you know, our gut was kind of saying, yeah, this kind of seems okay, but we wanted to make sure that we tested the concept, and thankfully we did, because now we're completely changing it around, and it's going to be a much better campaign. So the data is, obviously take the data with a grain of salt. And one thing that I like when I present reports to my boss about the number of hits to our website, or the number of impressions of an ad, or the number of people engaging with us. When he looks at it, he never looks at the number right down to the individual. So he doesn't see the 10,331.
Right,
he sees,
right.
Well, that's 10,000, right? So even if a third of them were off, even if 1,000 of them were off, we're still in the ballpark of the tens of thousands, right? And that's how he looks at the data, and that's how he evaluates success. And I think that's how we need to look at data, looking down to each individual, saying that you had 10,331 people visit your website, and then get upset when you find out that it was only 10,000. 203. It doesn't matter the individual click. What matters is the overall number. Did you get a significant amount of people to your website? Was your goal to engage? Was your goal to get people to come to your Facebook page and like you? Did you get a significant number of people who liked it? If so, then you should be patting yourself on the back, right? So it's looking at the numbers, taking them with a grain of salt, but we have to trust them to a certain degree.
Right. I 100% agree.
All right.
Hey, podcast listeners, are you enjoying this episode? If so, please consider leaving us a review on iTunes. Every month, Young PR Pros chooses one lucky person who reviews the show and sends them a thank you gift. This month, that person could be you. So head over to iTunes and leave us a review today. Now, back to the show.
Okay, so, we always love getting these nice little notes from listeners, and I really want to share this one email from a listener in Pennsylvania, which really, really made my day, and I think it made your day too, Ross.
Did.
His name is Will. He's a third-year public relations college student in Pennsylvania, United States, and he said that, I'd like to just say that I came across your podcast about a week ago, and it has made my 2-hour daily commute so much more enjoyable. I have learned a lot, and since I am the only student at my college pursuing a degree in public relations, it's great to hear outsider opinion and thoughts on a subject I normally don't get to hear about from peers. And here's the really interesting thing I found from his email. Working as a freelancer, a lot of what I implement is what I have learned from experts in the field. But normally, these experts are not younger and don't necessarily have a grasp on modern trends. One of my old bosses started her career in PR by typing on a selective typewriter.
Whoa.
It's nice to hear fresh ideas on the field from all of you. Thank you for making my day better. So, this is why we're here, Will. It's so great to hear these these comments, because really this is why we're here. We know that our industry has significantly changed. To his point, there are some people, some of your bosses, as you start working, may have actually started writing a news release on a typewriter. So
True.
Doesn't mean that their opinion is any less than ours, but it is what we really try to do is take the traditional talk about our industry, but then also focus it towards young listeners. So in his email, he also had a question for you and I. So what he asked is, he said, for a lot of people in PR, we have to organize a portfolio. And, he says that he wears a lot of hats sometimes, and he wants his portfolio to showcase all the stuff that he does, not just PR, but, he said he also works in photography, videography, marketing, web development, etc. And he's having a hard time sort of coalescing them and finding a way to showcase them so that he can show it to a potential client or, show it in an interview. So that's his question for us. And I thought it would be fun for you and I just to chat about how we organize our portfolio and our advice for our listener, Will. So did you want to kick it off?
Well, I think first and foremost, Will, thank you so much for writing the email. I love it. I think it's a great question, and it's something that I think a lot of young professionals struggle with, is this idea of how to show off the work, how to show off what they've been doing outside of kind of the traditional resume and CV kind of thing. So I think it's a great question. And I have a simple solution that I think everyone needs to invest in immediately. I think you need to go to a website like Namecheap.com and you buy your first and last name.com. You get a website, and then on that website, you are going to show everything and anything that you have been a part of. You're going to have an About Us section. You're going to have a link where people can download your resume. You're also going to show examples of the work that you have done. If you are a very creative person and you do everything from photography to writing to design, you're going to show all of that off. And if you're thinking to yourself, oh, I'm not a website developer, Ross, you always talk about this tech stuff like everybody's techie. There are simple sites that you can use to build galleries like Wix.com. You can go into WordPress and set up a very simple basic site, again, to kind of get that started. Squarespace, another great site where you can, within seconds, have a stunning website for very low cost, designer made. It might cost you like $2 a month to host it, or maybe it's $9 just for the domain. I think with Wix, you can have a site hosted for free. Like, there's so much opportunity in just owning your own domain. There's this idea that I've had for a long time, and I think it still rings true now more than ever. If somebody Googles you and nothing shows up, you do not exist. And I think that for young professionals, you need to invest in ensuring that when an employer searches your name, what shows up is exactly what you want, not what the world has already created.
I totally agree. Yeah. I'm not a technology inclined, person, and I was able to whip up a super easy website using WordPress. I've also used Wix before as well. And they're super easy to use. Again, they come with like pre-made templates that makes it look like you're a star when it comes to development, right?
It's true.
So it's not that hard to create a website. You could probably do it in a night after school, give yourself a couple of hours just to kind of coalesce everything and put it together. Now, one of the things that I did, and I've mentioned it on the podcast before, so in addition to the website, because it is just a nice place to just house everything, when I went into the interview to get my current job at CAA, one thing that I did is I put together a Pinterest portfolio. I had a lot of fun doing it.
Clever.
And I created a separate Pinterest account for this interview, and each of the boards were representing a different skill. So one was a writing board, one was a video board, one was a news release board, one was a media relations board. Anyway, I had a whole bunch of different boards. And then each of the boards had different pins, and each of the pins were showcasing different things that I had done. So either, the media relations one, I linked out to a couple of articles that I had secured for some volunteer work that I did. On the writing, I linked linked out to my blog, and I linked out to a couple of published pieces that I had. On my video, I linked out to like a project that I did for college. So I had a lot of fun. And when I showed up in my interview, I blew away the people who were interviewing me, because it was something that I had never seen before. And it was just a sort of fun, sort of interactive way that I could scroll through my portfolio and just kind of show them the different things that I had been up to. So that I had a lot of fun doing. Again, I spent a couple of hours putting it together. It did not take a lot of time. And it was something that was super easy to showcase who I was, and an easy interactive way that I could showcase it to people in an interview. So that's something that I would suggest if you want to, especially if you're using it for an interview.
I love it.
Thanks again to Reagan Awards for sponsoring this episode. Don't forget to check out Reagan's award programs. The video and visual PR Daily and ACE Award programs have many categories dedicated to new trends in PR and industry best practices. Make sure to use your code YOUNGPR to get 20% off entry fees for these 3 programs. Visit Reagan.com/awards to enter. That's Reagan.com/awards to enter. All right. Do you have an article for the Breakfast Club?
I do. So my article this week, if you were following us on Snapchat, you may have seen me do some breaking news around Twitter, announcing the 280 characters. And if you're not following us on Snapchat yet, you definitely need to get on that as well. But I talked about this new announcement around Twitter, as they just recently announced that they were rolling out slowly 280 characters to all of their users. And it's been a staggered process. So if you don't have it yet, just calm down. It's happening over time. But I wrote a blog post. So this is a pure shameless plug called the 11 Creative Ways to Use Twitter's new 280 character limit. And I think that everybody should check it out. It's very creative. It's very light. It's fun. It's not extremely marketing heavy, but it shows some great creativity that some different brands and some people have used with their 280 characters. There's one tweet in particular from the Muppets that I completely fell in love with. And I'll leave it to the listeners to check that out and see what it's all about. But it's on my site. I'll be sure to include it in the show notes.
That's awesome. Are you one of the people that has 280 characters yet?
I do not yet. They're holding out on me. But as soon as I get it, I've got an idea or two for what I'm going to say.
I also do not have it, sadly. But hopefully you'll probably get it before me. But so my article is something called the social media trifecta, and I think it's really important, especially given today's discussion on either trusting your gut and trusting data. I think what's really important is not to put all your eggs in one basket, and you should have a healthy mix of owned, paid, and earned media. So paid media, that's where you really dig down to like the data and you figure out, you run a social media ad campaign, you figure out who likes it, who doesn't, and then you move your money around to make sure that you're putting your money behind the audience that's resonating better with your ad. So you're really hard into data when it comes to paid. With earned media, like I was using my media relations example earlier, you might be trusting your gut a little bit more. But also sometimes probably wanting to be analytical to make sure that you don't share too much information. And then the owned media, that's where you get to have fun. You don't really necessarily need data for this, and you don't need your gut. This is where you're going to showcase your brand and try to communicate the key messages that you want your audience to be listening to. So there's reasons why you should be using all 3, and you shouldn't be using just one or the other. It's really important to have a healthy balance between all 3. And I think if you have a healthy balance between all 3, you're really going to help your brand on social media, or even just in general, your brand out there in the public. So it's a social media trifecta. There's a really sort of fun infographic where you can go through. If you're a visual learner like myself, it's fun to kind of go through it. But then there's also a short little blog post detailing the reasons why you want to be balanced in owned, paid, and earned. So that's a fun read, and we'll include it in the show notes.
Love it.
Let's wrap up our show today with lessons learned. What did you learn today, Ross?
It's a good question. So I think the key lesson for me in this one would definitely be simply around the idea of, I'm going to have to start over. I have no idea what my lesson learned is. I was going to try to ramble.
We didn't learn anything.
I didn't learn anything yet. Let me think.
I'm actually like, that's why I asked you first. I'm so selfish. I'm like, I have no idea what I learned. So I'm going to punt it to Ross.
Yeah. What did
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Young PR Pros. We would love to hear from you and hear how we did. You can email us at youngprpros@gmail.com. Check out our blog at youngprpros.ca. We're also on Facebook at Young PR Pros Podcast. And of course, Twitter at Young PR Pros. Thanks, and we'll talk to you next time. This episode featured tracks by Lee Rosevere. Sound work and editing by Claire Bonnyman.